Hi, my name is Takanori Komatsu from the Meiji University, Japan. So now I'm going to present our study. The title is Blaming the Reluctant Robot. So this work was done by a collaboration with Professor Malle from the Brown University and Professor Scheutz from the Tufts University. So as you know, the robots may be required to make difficult life or death decisions in near future, like a rescue robot working in a disaster site. In that case, the trust and acceptance of such future robots will depend on the people's moral evaluation of the robot's decisions. Then the pressing design issue arises, like what moral norms should be built into robots. Then to tackle with this issue, the variant of a classic story problem was used to capture the people's moral evaluations. So these are the narratives of robot or human agent placed in this dilemma, and this agent must choose between inaction is allowing 4 people to die from a runaway train, and action is diverting train to sidetrack, which means that to save the 4 but will kill 1 person. Here, the punishment morally evaluates robots or humans' decisions. But most of these studies were done by the US punishment. Then, the aim of this project is to investigate possible cultural differences between the US and Japan in moral judgment of the robots. Specifically, what are moral judgment? Then we then examine the 3 distinct kinds. The first one is called moral disqualifications, which indicating that whether a robot is proper target of moral judgment or not. So actually, this is not the philosophical argument, but assessing the empirically how many people find it meaningful to blame a robot for its decisions. For example, people say that this robot does not have a moral compass, or this robot is lack of moral emotions. So that these are the typical examples that the people disqualify the moral competencies of the robot. The second one is a non-judgment. So the non-judgment is done especially before learning about decisions. So in that case, the people estimate, oh yeah, what is the permissible and what is required, what is forbidden in these situations. Or maybe the what agent should do, or something like that one. The third one is a blame judgment. So this blame judgment is how much blame an agent deserves after a decision was made. So that these are grounded in norms plus psychological inference about causal impact, intentionality, and mental states. So let me summarize the previous result in the US studies, especially in terms of these 3 moral judgment. In terms about the moral disqualification rate, there are about 2/3 of participants find it natural and meaningful to blame robots. In that case, the disqualification rate was 32%. And in terms of the norm judgment, actually people assign a similar norm to the robots and the humans. Specifically, both the robots and the humans are expected to intervene to save 4 persons. And in terms of the blame judgment, the more blames for the robots than human when the agent chooses inaction. Inaction means that they're refraining from the intervening. So this diagram clearly shows that these are sentences. Actually, the robots that are refraining from the intervening receives a higher blaming rate compared to their humans also refraining the intervening. So this kind of the asymmetrical structure is called a human-robot blame asymmetry. So based on this summary, we hypothesis the Japanese moral judgment. The first one is that because of the different cultural beliefs about the robots, we hypothesis Japanese will show lower disqualification rate for the robots. Then next, because of the Japanese lower the relational mobility and the less accepted to sacrifice humans, we hypothesis that Japanese will be more accepting the robots' action decisions. And also because the blame judgment stem from the general cognitive processes that are human-robot blame asymmetry that should be observed in both the Japanese and the US cultures. Then we conducted the experiment 1, especially to capture the Japanese participants' the moral judgment with using the traditional switch case story problem, and these results were compared to the US previous studies. The first result is about the moral disqualifications. So in Japanese sample show that the 60.3 disqualification rate, whereas the US previous study shows a 32 disqualification rate. So there was a significant differences between these two values. So we could confirm that the moral disqualification hypothesis is supported. So this means that there are cultural differences actually between the US and Japan. Now next is about the moral norm judgment. So this diagram shows the permissibility to intervene in the actions. So the Japanese people that assign the lower the permissibility to the human agent, but the higher permissibility to the robot agent. Also that there's a significant differences between these two values. And also the US previous studies show there are also the lower permissibility to the human agent, higher permissibility to the robot agent, but there is no significant differences between them. So in that case, we concluded that the norm hypothesis is still inconclusive, but maybe that there is some possible cultural differences between US and Japan. And about the blame judgment, we could clearly observe the human-robot blame asymmetry, especially the both agents are refraining from the intervening. So this means that we could confirm that the blame hypotheses are strongly supported. So this means that there is no cultural differences for the psychology of brain. So then we conducted the experiment 2. So actually this experiment 2 is a kind of the parallel comparison with the Japanese sample and the US samples. Then we use the variant of the dilemma situations called a shoot case. So in this shoot case, is the 2 stops the runaway trolley. So this means that 2 saves the 4 persons. The agent have to open the chute to drop the heavier cart with a single worker onto the elevator. So actually this shoot case is regarded as a much more tough dilemma compared to the switch case dilemma. So the first example is again the moral disqualification. So in the Japanese sample show that there are 18.7% disqualification rate, and the US sample show that 25.1% disqualification rate. So actually there are significant differences between these two values, so that we could confirm that moral disqualification hypotheses are also supported. And about the norm judgment, also the Japanese sample shows a lower permissibility to the human agent, but a higher permissibility to the robot agent, and there are significant differences between them. But whereas the US participant assigned the almost equal permissibility to the human agent and the robot agent, that there are no significant differences. So in this case, either norm hypothesis is clearly supported. So this means that there are the cultural differences between US and Japan sample in this experiment too. So about the blame judgment is also the same with experiment 1. We could confirm, we could clearly observe that the human-robot blame asymmetry. So in that case, the blame hypotheses are also strongly supported in the experiment 2. So this means that there is no cultural differences for the psychology of brain. So to sum up this study, so we could say that compared to US participants, Japanese participants are more ready to accept robots as target of moral judgment, and Japanese participants are more allowing the robot to intervene in present dilemmas, and also that they are similarly blame robots more than humans for refusing to intervene. So this means that the moral disqualification and norm judgment show the predicted cultural differences, whereas the human-robot blame asymmetry appear to reflect culturally more general social moral cognition processes. So based on this result of this study, so we could get some implication. So studying the cross-cultural similarities can be just as revealing as studying the cross-cultural differences. And also the HRI researchers must develop sensitive methods and theories to capture such differences and similarities. And finally, the design of social moral robot must take into account both similarity and differences. So our presentation is over. So we are very happy to answer to your question. Thanks a lot.